Extract from Book X of Laws by Plato, translated by Benjamin Jowett. Athenian Stranger. No one ever intentionally did any unholy act, or uttered any unlawful word, retaining a belief in the existence of the gods; but he must have supposed one of three things: either that they did not exist, that is the first possibility; or secondly, that if they did, they took no care of man; or thirdly, that they were easily appeased by sacrifices, or turned from their course by prayers. Cleinias. What shall we say or do to these persons? Athenian Stranger. My good friends, let us first hear the jests which I suspect that they in their superiority will utter against us. Cleinias. What jests? Athenian Stranger. They will make some provoking speech of this sort: O inhabitants of Athens, and Sparta, and Knossos, they will reply, in that you speak truly; for some of us deny the very existence of the gods, while others, as you say, are of opinion that they do not care about us, and others that they are turned from their course by gifts. Now we have a right to claim, as you yourself allowed, in the matter of the laws, that before you are hard upon us and threaten us, you should argue with us and convince us. You should first attempt to teach and convince us that there are gods. Let that be shown to us by reasonable evidences; and also that they are too good to be unrighteous, or to be propitiated, or turned from their course by gifts. For when we hear these and like things said of them by those who are esteemed to be the best of poets and orators, and prophets and priests, and innumerable others, the thoughts of most of us are not set upon abstaining from unrighteous acts, but upon doing them and making atonement for them. When lawgivers profess that they are gentle and not stern, we think that they should first of all use persuasion to us, and show us the existence of gods, if not in a better manner than other men, at any rate in a truer; and who knows but that we shall hearken to them? If then our request is a fair one, please to accept our challenge. Cleinias. But is there any difficulty in proving the existence of the gods? Athenian Stranger. How would you prove their existence? Cleinias. How? In the first place, the earth, and the sun, and the stars, and the universe, and the fair order of the seasons, and the division of them into years and months, furnish proofs of their existence; and also there is the fact that all Hellenes and barbarians believe in them. Athenian Stranger. I am afraid, my sweet friend, though I will not say I am ashamed, of the contempt with which the profane will be likely to assail us. For you do not understand the nature of their complaint, and fancy that their minds rush into impiety only from a love of sensual pleasure. Cleinias. Why, stranger, what other reason is there? Athenian Stranger. One which you who live in another part of the world would never guess. Cleinias. What is that? Athenian Stranger. A very grievous sort of ignorance, which is imagined to be the greatest wisdom. Cleinias. What do you mean? Athenian Stranger. At Athens there are tales preserved in writing, which the virtue of your state, as I am informed, refuses to admit. They speak of the gods in prose as well as verse, and the oldest of them tell of the origin of the heavens and the world; and as they proceed not far from the beginning, they narrate the birth of the gods, and how, after they were born, they behaved to one another. Whether these stories have a good or a bad influence, I should not like to be severe upon them, because they are ancient; but I must say that looking at them with reference to the duties of children to their parents, I cannot praise them, or think that they are useful, or at all true. Of the words of the ancients I have nothing more to say, and I should wish to say of them only what is pleasing to the God. But as to our younger generation and their wisdom, I cannot let them off when they do mischief. For do but mark the effect of their words, when you and I argue that there are Gods, and produce the sun, moon, and stars as Gods or divine beings. If we would listen to the aforesaid philosophers, we should say that they are earth and stones only, which can have no care at all of human affairs, and that all this is a cooking up of words, and a make-believe. Cleinias. One such teacher, O stranger, would be bad enough. And you imply that there are many of them, which is worse. Athenian stranger. Well then, what shall we say or do? Shall we assume that some one is accusing us among unholy men, and that they, and not we, are the real defendants in the matter of legislation? They will say of us, how dreadful that we should legislate on the supposition that there are Gods! And shall we make a defence? Or shall we leave them and return to our laws, lest the preamble should become longer than the law? For the discourse will certainly extend to great length, if we are to treat the impiously disposed as they desire, partly arguing with them as they demand, partly frightening them, or inspiring aversion in them, and then proceed to the requisite enactments. Cleinias. Yes, stranger. But then, how often have we repeated already that there is no reason why brevity should be preferred to length? For there is nobody to hurry us, and it would be paltry and ridiculous to prefer the shorter to the better. It is a matter of no small consequence that our reasons in proof of the assertion that there are Gods, and that they are good, and regard justice more than men, should carry some sort of conviction with them. This would be the best and noblest preamble of all our laws. And therefore, without impatience, and without hurry, let us summon, as far as possible, all the power of persuasion which we possess, and unreservedly consider the whole matter. Athenian stranger. When I see you thus earnest, I feel impelled to offer up a prayer, and can no longer refrain. Tell me, I say, who can preserve calmness, having to speak of the existence of the Gods? For he must hate and abhor the men who are and have been the cause of these words of ours. I speak of those who will not believe the words which they have heard as babes and sucklings from their mothers and nurses, who used them as charms, both in jest and earnest, whom also they have heard and seen offering up sacrifices and prayers, sights and sounds delightful to children, of their parents sacrificing in the most earnest manner on behalf of them and of themselves, and with eager interest talking to the Gods, and beseeching them as though they were firmly convinced of their existence. Moreover, they see and hear the genuflections and prostrations which are made by Hellenes and barbarians to the rising and setting sun and moon, in all the various turns of good and evil fortune, not as if they thought that there were no Gods, but as if there could be no doubt of their existence, and no suspicion of their non-existence. When men, knowing all these things, despise them on no real grounds, as would be admitted by all who have any particle of intelligence, and when they force us to say what we are now saying, how can any one in gentle terms remonstrate with the like of them, when he has to begin by proving to them the very existence of the Gods? Yet the attempt must be made, For it would be unseemly that one half of mankind should go mad with lust, and the other half in righteous indignation at them. Our address to these lost and perverted natures should not be spoken in passion. Let us suppose ourselves to select some one of them, and gently reason with him, smothering our anger. O my son, we say to him, you are young, and the advance of time will make you reverse many of the opinions which you now hold. Wait, therefore, until the time comes, and do not attempt to judge of high matters at present. And that is the highest of which you think nothing, to know the Gods rightly, and to live accordingly. And in the first place, let me indicate to you one point which is of great importance, and of the truth of which I am quite certain. You and your friends are not the first to have held this opinion about the Gods. There have always been persons, more or less numerous, who have had the same disorder. I have known many of them, and can tell you this, that no one who had taken up in youth this opinion, that the Gods do not exist, ever continued in the same until he was old. The two other notions certainly do continue in some cases, but not in many. The notion, I mean, that the Gods exist, but take no heed of human things, and also the notion that they do take heed of them, but are easily propitiated with sacrifices and prayers. What may be the true doctrine, if you are patient, and take my advice, you will hereafter discover by the help of the legislator and of others. In the meantime, take heed lest you offend about the Gods, for the duty of the legislator, now and always, will be to teach you the truth of these matters. Cleinias. Your address, stranger, thus far is excellent. Athenian stranger. Most true, Megalos and Cleinias, but I am afraid that we have unconsciously lighted on a strange doctrine. Cleinias. What doctrine do you mean? Athenian stranger. The wisest of all doctrines, in the opinion of many. Cleinias. I wish that you would speak plainer. Athenian stranger. The doctrine that all things which are, or have been, or will be, exist, some by nature, some by art, and some by chance. Cleinias. Is not that true? Athenian stranger. Well, philosophers are probably right. At any rate, we may as well follow in their track, and examine what is the meaning of them and their disciples. Cleinias. By all means. Athenian stranger. They say that the greatest and fairest things are done by nature and chance, and the lesser by art, which receives from nature all the greater and primeval creations, and fashions them in detail, and these lesser works are generally termed artificial. Cleinias. What do you and they mean? Athenian stranger. You will understand their meaning better, if I take the elements as an example. They mean to say that fire and water and earth and air all exist by nature and chance, and not by art, and that as to the bodies which come next in order, earth and sun and moon and stars, they are created by the help of these absolutely inanimate existences, and that they are severally moved by chance and some inherent influence according to certain affinities of hot with cold, or of dry with moist, or of soft with hard, and other chance admixtures of opposites which have united of necessity, and that on this manner the whole heaven has been created, and all that is in the heaven, including animals and all plants, and that all the seasons come from these elements, not by the action of mind, as they say, or of any God, or from art, but, as I was saying, by nature and chance only, and that art sprang up after these and out of them, mortal and of mortal birth, and produced in play certain images and very partial imitations of the truth, having an affinity to one another, such as music and painting create, and their companion arts. And there are other arts which have a serious purpose, and these co-operate with nature; such, for example, as medicine and husbandry and gymnastic; and they say that politics co-operate with nature, but in a less degree, and have more of art; also that legislation is entirely a work of art, and is based on assumptions which are not true. Cleinias. How do you mean? Athenian stranger. In the first place, my dear friend, they would say that the Gods exist neither by nature or by art, but only by the laws of states, which are different in different places, according to the agreement of those who make them; and that the honourable is one thing by nature, and another thing by law; and that the principles of justice have no existence at all in nature, but that mankind are always disputing about them, and altering them; and that the alterations which are made by art and by law have no basis in nature, but are of authority for the moment and at the time at which they are made. These, my friends, are the sayings of wise men, poets, and prose writers, which find a way into the minds of young men. They are told by them that the highest right is might, and in this way the young fall into impieties, under the idea that the Gods are not such as the law bids them imagine them, and hence arise contentions; the philosophers inviting them to lead a true life according to nature, which is to live in real dominion over others, and not in legal subjection to them. Cleinias. What a dreadful picture, stranger, have you given of young men, and how great is the injury which they inflict on states and families! Athenian stranger. True, Cleinias; but then what should the lawgiver do when this evil is of long standing? Should he only rise up in the state and threaten all mankind, declaring that if they will not say and think that the Gods are such as the law ordains, and this may be extended generally to the honourable, the just, and all other important principles which have to do with virtue and vice, he will insist on their actions conforming to the copy which the law gives them, and that he who will not submit to the established religion shall die, or suffer stripes and bonds, or privation of citizenship, or in some cases be punished by loss of property and exile. Should he not, rather, when he is making laws for men, at the same time infuse the spirit of persuasion into his words, in order to mitigate the severity of them as far as he can? Cleinias. Why, stranger, if such persuasion be at all possible, then a legislator who has anything in him ought never to weary of persuading men. He ought to leave nothing unsaid in support of the ancient opinion that there are Gods, and of all those other truths which you were just now mentioning. He ought to support the law, and also art, and acknowledge that both alike exist by nature, or by that which is not inferior to nature, if they are the creations of mind in accordance with right reason, as you appear to me to maintain. And I am disposed to agree with you in thinking. Athenian stranger. Yes, my enthusiastic Cleinias. But are not these things, when spoken to a multitude, hard to be understood, not to mention that they take up a dismal length of time? Cleinias. Why, stranger, shall we, whose patience failed not when drinking or music were the themes of discourse, weary now of discoursing about the Gods, and about divine things? And the greatest help to rational legislation is that laws, when once written down, are always at rest. They can be put to the test at any future time, and therefore, if on first hearing they seem difficult, there is no reason for apprehension about them, because any man, however dull, can understand them if he go over them often. Nor, if they are tedious but useful, is there any reason or religion in any man refusing to maintain this argument of ours to the utmost of his power. Megillus. I am of opinion, stranger, that Cleinias is right in saying that. Athenian stranger. Yes, Megillus, and we should do as he proposes. For if impious discourses were not scattered, as I may say, throughout the world, there would have been no need of the argument in support of the existence of the Gods. But seeing that they are spread far and wide, such arguments are needed. And who should come to the rescue of the greatest laws, when they are being undermined by bad men, but the legislator himself? Megillus. There is no more proper champion of them. Athenian stranger. Well then, tell me, Cleinias, for I must ask you to be my partner, does not he who talks in this way conceive fire, and water, and earth, and air to be the first elements of all things? These he calls nature, and out of these he supposes the soul to be formed afterwards. And this is not a vague suspicion of his, but he really means and confidently asserts that this is the case. Cleinias. Very true. Athenian stranger. Then, by heaven, we have discovered the source of this vain opinion of all those physical investigators, and I would have you examine them with the utmost care, for their impiety is a very serious matter. They not only make a bad and mistaken use of their dialectic, but they lead away the minds of others. That is my opinion of them. Cleinias. Very true, but I should like to know in what way this happens. Athenian stranger. I am afraid that the argument might seem singular. Cleinias. Do not hesitate, stranger. I see that you are afraid of such a discussion carrying you out of the limits of legislation. But if there be no other way of showing our agreement in the belief of the Gods, whom the law is now said to approve, let us take this way, my good sir. Athenian stranger. Then I suppose that I must repeat the singular argument of those who manufacture the soul according to their own impious notions. They affirm that which is the first cause of the generation and destruction of all things to be not first, but last, and that which was last to be first, and hence they have fallen into error about the true nature of the Gods. Cleinias. Still I do not understand you. Athenian stranger. Nearly all of them, my friends, seem to be ignorant of the nature and power of the soul, especially in what relates to her origin. They do not know that she is among the first of bodies, and before them all, and is the chief author of their changes and transpositions. And if this is true, and if the soul is older than the body, must not the things which are of the soul's kindred be of necessity before those which appertain to the body? Cleinias. Certainly. Athenian stranger. Then thought and care, and mind and art, and law will be prior to that which is hard and soft, and heavy and light, and the great and primitive works and actions will be works of art. They will be the first, and after them will come nature and works of nature, which, however, is a wrong term to apply to them. These will follow, and be under the government of art and mind. Cleinias. But why is the word nature wrong? Athenian stranger. because those who use the term mean to say that nature is the first creative power. But if the soul turn out to be the primeval element, and not fire or air, then, in the truest sense, and beyond other things, the soul may be said to have a natural or creative power. And this would be true if you proved that the soul is older than the body, but not otherwise. Cleinias. You are quite right. Athenian Stranger. Shall we then, in the next place, proceed to consider this point? Cleinias. By all means. Athenian Stranger. I fear that we may be quite deceived, and that the greenness with which we let the argument escape us may ludicrously contrast with the ripeness of our ages. Who knows but we may be aiming at the greater, and fail of attaining the lesser? Suppose that we three have to pass a rapid river, and I, being the youngest of the three, and experienced in rivers, have the duty thrown upon me of making the attempt first by myself, leaving you in safety on the bank. I am to examine whether the river is passable by older men like yourselves, and if such appears to be the case, then I will invite you to follow, and help you across by my knowledge. But if the river is impassable by you, then I shall have had all the danger myself. Does not that seem to be a very fair proposal? I mean to say that the argument in prospect is likely to be too violent, and indeed almost impassable to men of your dialectical powers, and I should be afraid that the stream of questions addressed to you might create in you, who are unaccustomed to be questioned, giddiness and confusion of mind, and hence a feeling of unpleasantness and unsuitableness might arise. I think, therefore, that I had better first ask and answer the questions myself, while you listen in safety. In that way I can carry on the argument until I have completed the proof that the soul is prior to the body. Cleinias. Excellent, stranger, and I hope that you will do as you propose. Athenian Stranger. Come then, and if we are to call upon the Gods, let us call upon them now, in all seriousness, to come to the demonstration of their own existence, and so, holding fast to the rope, we will venture upon the depths of the argument. When questions of this sort are asked of me, my safest answer would appear to be as follows. Some one says to me, quote, "O stranger, are all things in rest, and nothing in motion? Or is the exact opposite of this true? Or are some things in motion, and others at rest?" Close quote. To this I shall reply that some are in motion, and others at rest. Quote, and do not things which move in place, and are not the things which are at rest in place? Close quote. Certainly. Quote, and some move in one place, and some in more places than one? Close quote. You mean to say, we shall rejoin, that those things which rest on a centre move in the same place, like revolving circles, which are said not to move? Quotes, yes. And we observe that in the revolution, the motion which carries round the larger and the lesser circle at the same time is proportionally distributed to greater and smaller, and is greater and smaller in a certain proportion? And this is a source of infinite wonder, that the same motion should impart swiftness and slowness in due accord to larger and lesser circles, and is a sort of phenomenon seemingly impossible. Quote, that is very true. Close quote. And when you speak of bodies moving in many places, you seem to me to mean those which move from one place to another, and sometimes have one centre of motion, and sometimes several, in the course of their revolutions, and sometimes impinging upon each other, they come against bodies which are at rest, and are divided by them, and meeting other bodies, which are coming violently from an opposite direction, unite with them and interpenetrate them. "I admit the truth of this." Also, when they unite they grow, and when they are divided they waste away. That is supposing the constitution of each to remain; or if that fails, then there is a second reason of their dissolution. "And how are things affected when they are created?" Clearly, they are created when the principle of motion receives increase and attains the second dimension, and from this arrives at the one which is neighbour to this, and after reaching the third, becomes perceptible to sense. Everything which is thus changing and moving is in process of generation, and has real existence only when at rest, but when passing into another state is destroyed utterly. Have we not mentioned all the kinds of motion, and by the help of number comprehended them under their kinds, with the exception, my friends, of two? Cleinias. Which are they? Athenian stranger. Just the two, my good friends, with which our present inquiry is concerned. Cleinias. Speak plainer. Athenian stranger. I suppose that our inquiry has reference to the soul? Cleinias. Very true. Athenian stranger. Let us assume that there is a motion able to move other things, but not to move itself. That is one kind, and there is another kind which can move itself as well as other things, working in composition and decomposition, by increase and diminution, and generation and destruction. That is also one of the many kinds of motion. Cleinias. Let us suppose that. Athenian stranger. And we will assume that which moves other, and is changed by other, to be the ninth, and that which changes itself and others, and has a place in every action, and in every passion, and is the true principle of change in all that truly is, that we shall be inclined to call the tenth. Cleinias. Certainly. Athenian stranger. And which of these 10 motions ought we to prefer as being the mightiest and most efficient? Cleinias. I must say that the motion which is able to move itself is 10,000 times superior to all the others. Athenian stranger. Very good; but may I make one or two corrections in what I have been saying? Cleinias. What are they? Athenian stranger. When I spoke of the 10th sort of motion, that was not quite correct. Cleinias. What was the error? Athenian stranger. According to the true order, the 10th was really the first in generation and power. Then follows the second, which was improperly termed the 9th by us. Cleinias. What do you mean? Athenian stranger. I mean this. When one thing moves another, and that another, will there be any primary changing element? Can there be, considering that what changes first will always have been changed by another? There cannot. And when the self moved changes other, and that again other, and thus thousands upon tens of thousands of bodies are set in motion, must not the beginning of all this motion be the change of the self-moving principle? Cleinias. Very true, and I quite agree. Athenian stranger. Or, to put the question in another way, if, as most of these philosophers have the audacity to affirm, all things were at rest in one mass, which of the above-mentioned principles of motion would first spring up among them? Cleinias. Clearly the self-moving, for there could be no change in them arising out of any external cause, if there had been no previous change in themselves. Athenian stranger. Then we must say that self-motion, being the origin and beginning of motion, as well among things at rest as among things in motion, is the eldest and mightiest principle of change, and that which is changed by another, and yet moves other, is second. Cleinias. That is very true. Athenian stranger. At this stage of the argument, let us put a question. Cleinias. What question? Athenian stranger. If I were to see this power existing in any earthy, watery, or fiery substance, simple or compound, what should I say that the power is? Cleinias. You mean to ask whether I should call the self-moving power life? Athenian stranger. I do. Cleinias. Yes, I certainly should. Athenian stranger. And when we see soul in anything, must we not do the same? Must we not admit that this is life? Cleinias. We must. Athenian stranger. And now, I beseech you, reflect. You would admit that we have a threefold knowledge of things? Cleinias. What do you mean? Athenian stranger. I mean that we know the essence, and that we know the definition of the essence, and the name. These are the three, and there are two more questions which may be raised about anything. Cleinias. How two? Athenian stranger. Sometimes a person may give the name, and ask the definition, or he may give the definition, and ask the name. I may illustrate what I mean in this way. Cleinias. How? Athenian stranger. Number, like other things, is capable of being divided into equal parts. When thus divided, number is termed even, and the definition of the term even is number divisible into two equal parts. Cleinias. True. Athenian stranger. I mean to say that when we are asked about the definition and give the name, or when we are asked about the name and give the definition, in either case we are dividing number in two equal parts, and the name and definition of even have the same import. Cleinias. Quite true. Athenian stranger. And what is the definition of that which is named soul? Can we conceive of any other than that which has been already given, the motion which is self-moved? Cleinias. You mean to say that the essence which is defined as the self-moved is identical with that which we call soul? Athenian stranger. Yes, and if this is true, do we still maintain that there is anything wanting in the proof that the soul is the first origin and moving power of all that is, or has been, or will be, and their contraries, when she has been clearly shown to be the source of change and motion in all things? Cleinias. Certainly not. The soul, as being the source of motion, has been most satisfactorily shown to be the oldest of all things. Athenian stranger. And is not that motion which takes place in another, or by reason of another, but never has any self-moving power at all, being in truth the change of an inanimate body, to be reckoned in the second degree, or in any lower degree which you may prefer? Cleinias. Very true. Athenian stranger. Then we are right, and speak the most perfect and absolute truth, when we say that the soul is prior to the body, and that the body is second and comes afterwards, and is born to obey the soul, which is the ruler. Cleinias. That is very true. Athenian stranger. Do you remember our old admission that if the soul was prior to the body, the things of the soul were also prior to those of the body? Cleinias. Certainly. Athenian stranger. And characters, and manners, and wishes, and reasonings, and true opinions, and reflections and recollections are prior to length and breadth and depth and strength of bodies, if the soul is prior to the body? Cleinias. Of course. Athenian stranger. In the next place, must we not of necessity admit that the soul is the cause of good and evil, base and honourable, just and unjust, and of all other opposites, if we suppose her to be the cause of all things? Cleinias. Certainly. Athenian stranger. And as the soul orders and inhabits all things moving every way, must we not say that she orders also the heavens? Cleinias. Of course. Athenian stranger. One soul or more? More than one. I will answer for you. At any rate, we must not suppose that there are less than two, one the author of good, and the other of evil. Cleinias. Very true. Athenian stranger. Yes, very true. The soul then directs all things in heaven and earth and sea by her movements, and these are described by the terms will, consideration, attention, deliberation, opinion true and false, joy and sorrow, confidence, fear, hatred, contentment, and other primary motions akin to these, which again receive the secondary motions of corporate substances, and guide all things to growth and decay, to composition and decomposition, and to the qualities which accompany them, such as heat and cold, heaviness and lightness, hardness and softness, blackness and whiteness, bitterness and sweetness, and all those other qualities which the soul uses, herself a goddess, when truly receiving the divine mind and disciplining all things rightly to their happiness, but when the companion of folly, doing the very contrary of all this. Shall we assume this, or do we still entertain doubts? Cleinias. There is no room at all for doubt. Athenian stranger. Shall we say then that soul is the nature which controls heaven and earth, and the whole circumference, the principle of wisdom and virtue, or that which has neither wisdom nor virtue? Suppose that we make answer as follows. Cleinias. How would you answer? Athenian stranger. If, my friend, we say that the whole path of heaven, and the movement of all that is therein, is by nature akin to the movement and revolution and calculation of mind, and proceeds by kindred laws, then, as is plain, we must say that the best soul takes care of the world, and guides it along the good path. Cleinias. True. Athenian stranger. But when the world moves wildly and irregularly, then the evil soul guides it. Cleinias. That again is true. Athenian stranger. Of what nature is the movement of mind? That is indeed a hard question, my friends, to determine wisely, and therefore I ought to assist you in framing the answer. Cleinias. Very good. Athenian stranger. Then let us not answer as if we would look right at the sun, making ourselves darkness from excess of light. I mean as if we were under the impression that we could see with mortal eyes, or know adequately the nature of mind. It will be safer to look at the image only. Cleinias. What do you mean? Athenian stranger. Let us select of the 10 motions the one which mind chiefly resembles. This I will bring to your recollection, and will then request you to assist me in giving the answer. Cleinias. That will be excellent. Athenian stranger. You will surely remember our saying that all things were either at rest or in motion. Cleinias. Yes. Athenian stranger. And that of things in motion, some were moving in one place, and others in more than one. Cleinias. That is true. Athenian stranger. Of these two kinds of motion, that which moves in one place must move about a centre after the manner of a top, and is most entirely akin and similar to the circular movement of mind. Cleinias. What do you mean? Athenian stranger. In saying that both mind and the motion which is in one place move in the same and like manner, in and about the same, and in relation to the same, and according to one law and order, and are like the motion of a top, we invented a fair image, which did no discredit to our ingenuity. Cleinias. That is very true. Athenian stranger. And the motion of the other sort, which is not after the same manner, nor in the same, nor about the same, nor in relation to the same, nor in one place, nor in order, nor according to any rule or proportion, may be said to be akin to senselessness and folly. Cleinias. That is most true. Athenian stranger. Then, after what has been said, there is no difficulty in distinctly stating that since soul carries all things round, either the best soul or the contrary must of necessity carry round, and order and arrange the revolution of the heaven. Cleinias. And, judging from what has been said, stranger, there would be impiety in asserting that any but the most perfect soul or souls carries round the heavens. Athenian stranger. You have understood my meaning right well, Cleinias. And now let me ask you another question. Cleinias. What are you going to ask? Athenian stranger. If the soul carries round the sun and moon and the other stars, does she not carry round each individual of them? Cleinias. Certainly. Athenian stranger. Then of one of them let us speak, and the same argument will apply to all. Cleinias. Which will you take? Athenian stranger. Every one sees the body of the sun, but no one sees his soul, nor the soul of any other body, living or dead. And yet there is great reason to believe that this nature, unperceived by any of our senses, is circumfused around them all, but is apprehended by mind only, and only by reflection do we ascertain what I am about to mention. Cleinias. What is that? Athenian stranger. If the soul carries round the sun, we shall not be far wrong in supposing one of three alternatives. Cleinias. What are they? Athenian stranger. Either the soul, which moves the sun this way and that, resides within the circular and visible body, just as the soul in us carries us about every way, or the soul provides herself with an external body of fire or air, as some affirm, and violently propels body by body, or, thirdly, being incorporeal, she has some extraordinary and wonderful guiding power. Cleinias. Yes, certainly, the soul can only order all things in one of these three ways. Athenian stranger. And this soul of the sun, which is therefore better than the sun, whether taking the sun about in a chariot to give light to men, or acting from without, or in whatever way, ought by every man to be deemed a god. Cleinias. Yes, by every man who has the least particle of sense. Athenian stranger. And of the stars too, and of the moon, and the years, and months, and seasons, must we not say, in like manner, that since a soul or souls are the causes of all of them having every sort of excellence, those souls are divine, whether they are living beings and reside in bodies, and in this way order the whole heaven, or whatever be the place and mode of their existence? And will any one who admits all this venture to deny that all things are full of Gods? Cleinias. No one, stranger, would be such a madman as to do that. Athenian stranger. And now, Megalos and Cleinias, let us offer an alternative to him who has hitherto denied the existence of the Gods, and leave him. Cleinias. What alternative? Athenian stranger. Either he shall teach us that we were wrong in saying that the soul is the original of all things, and what followed upon this; or, if he be not able to say anything better, then he must yield to us, and live for the remainder of his life in the belief that there are Gods. Let us see, then, whether we have said enough, or not enough, to those who deny that there are Gods. Cleinias. Certainly, quite enough, stranger. Athenian stranger. Then we will say no more to them. And now we are to address him who, believing that there are Gods, believes also that they take no heed of human affairs. O thou best of men! This is what we will say to him. In believing that there are Gods, you are led by some affinity to them, which attracts you towards your kindred, and makes you honor and believe in them. But the fortunes of evil and unrighteous men in private as well as public life, which, though not really happy, are wrongly counted happy in the judgment of men, and are sung or spoken of by poets and prose writers, draw you aside from your natural piety. Perhaps you have seen impious men growing old and leaving their children's children in high offices, and that shakes your faith. You have known or heard or been yourself an eye-witness of many monstrous impieties, and have beheld men, by these criminal means, from small beginnings, reaching the pinnacle of greatness, and considering all these things you do not like to accuse the Gods of them, because they are your relatives. And so, from some want of reasoning power, and also from an unwillingness to find fault with them, you are led to believe that they exist indeed, but have no thought or care of human things. Now, that your present evil opinion may not grow to still greater impiety, and that we may, if possible, use arguments which may drive away the pollution of error, we will add another argument to that which we address to him who utterly denied the existence of the Gods. And do you, Megalos and Cleinias, answer for the young man, as you did before; and if any difficulty arises in the course of the argument, I will take the word out of your mouths, and carry you over the river, as I did before. Cleinias. Very good. Do as you say, and we will help you as well as we can. Athenian stranger. There will surely be no difficulty in proving to him that the Gods care about the small as well as about the great, for he was present and heard what was said, that they are perfectly good, and that the care of all things is most entirely natural to them. Cleinias. He certainly heard that. Athenian stranger. Let us consider together, in the next place, what we mean by this virtue which we ascribe to them. Surely we should say that to possess mind belongs to virtue, and the contrary to vice. Cleinias. Certainly. Athenian stranger. Yes, and courage is a part of virtue, and cowardice of vice. Cleinias. True. Athenian stranger. And the one is dishonourable, and the other honourable. Cleinias. To be sure. Athenian stranger. and the one, like other meaner things, is a human quality, but the Gods have no part in anything of the sort. Cleinias. No one will deny that. Athenian stranger. But do we imagine carelessness and idleness and luxury to be virtues? What do you think? Cleinias. Certainly not. Athenian stranger. They rank under the opposite class? Cleinias. Yes. Athenian stranger. And their opposites would fall under the opposite class? Cleinias. Yes. Athenian stranger. But can we suppose that one who takes care of great and small will be luxurious and heedless and idle, like those whom the poet compares to stingless drones? Cleinias. And the comparison is a most just one. Athenian stranger. Surely God must not be supposed to have a nature which he himself hates. And if any one dares to say anything of that sort, he must not be allowed for a moment. Cleinias. He must not. Of course not. Athenian stranger. Should we not, on any principle, be entirely mistaken in praising any one who has some special business entrusted to him, he having a mind which takes care of great matters and no care of small ones? Reflect. He who acts in this way, whether he be God or man, must act from one of two principles. Cleinias. What are they? Athenian stranger. Either he must think that the neglect of the small matters is of no consequence to the whole, or if they are of consequence, and he neglects them, his conduct must be attributed to carelessness and indolence. Is there any other way in which his neglect can be explained? For surely he will not neglect anything, whether small or great, from any impossibility of taking care of all, or be careless about those things of which an inferior being, who has not the power, whether God or man, might be unable to take care. Cleinias. Impossible. Athenian stranger. Now then, let us examine the offenders, who both alike confess that there are Gods, but with a difference, the one saying that they may be appeased, and the other that they have no care of small matters. There are three of us, and two of them, and we will say to them, in the first place, you both acknowledge that the Gods hear, and see, and know all things, and that nothing can escape them, which is matter of sense and knowledge. Do you admit this? Cleinias. Yes. Athenian stranger. And do you admit also that they have all power which mortals and immortals can have? Cleinias. They will, of course, admit this also. Athenian stranger. And surely we three, and they two, five in all, have acknowledged that they are good and perfect. Cleinias. Assuredly. Athenian stranger. But if they are such as we conceive them to be, can we possibly suppose that they ever act in the spirit of carelessness and indolence? For in us inactivity is the child of cowardice, and carelessness of inactivity and indolence. Cleinias. Most true. Athenian stranger. Then not from inactivity and carelessness is any God ever negligent, for he has no cowardice in him. Cleinias. That is very true. Athenian stranger. Then the alternative which remains is, that if the Gods neglect the lighter and lesser concerns of the universe, they neglect them because they know that they ought not to care about such matters. What other alternative is there but that they have no knowledge? Cleinias. There is none. Athenian stranger. And, O most excellent and best of men, do I understand you to mean that they are ignorant, and do not know that they ought to take care, or that they know, and yet, like the meanest sort of men, knowing the better, choose the worse, because they are overcome by pleasures and pains. Cleinias. Impossible. Athenian stranger. Do not all human things partake of the nature of soul? And is not man the most religious of all animals? Cleinias. That is certainly true. Athenian stranger. Surely we say that all mortal creatures are the property of the Gods, to whom also the whole of heaven belongs. Cleinias. Certainly. Athenian stranger. And now, whether a person says that these things to the Gods are great or small, in either case the Gods, who own us, and who are the most careful, and the best of owners, are not likely to neglect us. There is also a further consideration. Cleinias. What is that? Athenian stranger. Sensation and power are in an inverse ratio to each other in respect to their ease and difficulty. Cleinias. What do you mean? Athenian stranger. I mean that there is greater difficulty in seeing and hearing the small than the great, but more facility in moving them and controlling them and taking care of them than of their opposites. Cleinias. Far more. Athenian stranger. Suppose the case of a physician who is willing and able to cure some living thing as a whole. How will the whole fare at his hands, if he takes care only of the greater and neglects the lesser? Cleinias. Certainly not well. Athenian stranger. No better would be the result with pilots, or generals, or householders, or statesmen, or any other class, if they neglected the small and regarded only the great. As the builders say, the larger stones do not lie well without the lesser. Cleinias. Of course not. Athenian stranger. Let us not then deem God inferior to human workmen, who, in proportion to their skill, finish and perfect their works, small as well as great, by one and the same art; or that God, the wisest of beings, who is willing and able to extend his care to all things, like a lazy good-for-nothing, wants a holiday, and takes no thought of smaller and easier matters, but of the greater only. Cleinias. Never, stranger, let us admit such a supposition about the Gods, which is both impious and false. Athenian stranger. I think that we have now said enough to him who charges the Gods with neglect. Cleinias. Yes. Athenian stranger. He has been forced to acknowledge that he is in error, but he still seems to me to need some consolation. Cleinias. What consolation will you offer him? Athenian stranger. Let us say to the youth, the ruler of the universe has ordered all things with a view to the preservation and perfection of the whole, and each part has an appointed state of action and passion, and the smallest action or passion of any part affecting the minutest fraction has a presiding minister, and one of these portions of the universe is thine own, stubborn man, which, however little, has the whole in view; and you do not seem to be aware that this, and every other creation, is for the sake of the whole, and in order that the life of the whole may be blessed, and that you are created for the sake of the whole, and not the whole for the sake of you. For every physician and every skilled artist does all things for the sake of the whole, directing his effort toward the common good, executing the part for the sake of the whole, and not the whole for the sake of the part. And you are annoyed because you do not see how that which is best for you is, as far as the laws of the creation admit of this, best also for the universe. Now, as the soul, combining first with one body and then with another, undergoes all sorts of changes, either of herself or through the influence of another soul, all that remains to the master of the game is that he should transpose the pieces, sending the better nature to the better place, and the worse into the worse, and so assigning to them their proper portion. Cleinias. How do you mean? Athenian stranger. I am proposing a plan which may be supposed to make the care of all things easy to the Gods. For if any one did not form or fashion all things with a view to the whole, if, for example, he formed a living element of water out of fire, instead of forming many things out of one, or one out of many, not at random, but in regular order of the first or second or third degree, the transmutation would have been infinite. But now the ruler of the world has a wonderfully easy task. Cleinias. How is that? Athenian stranger. In this way. When the king saw that our actions had life, and that there was much virtue in them, and much vice, and that the soul and body, although not eternal, were indestructible, like the Gods of popular opinion, for if either of them had been destroyed, there would have been no generation of animals, and when he observed that the good of the soul was by nature designed to profit men, and the evil to harm them, he, seeing all this, contrived so to place them in each of the parts, that their position might in the easiest and best manner procure the victory of good and the defeat of evil in the whole. And he contrived a general plan, by which a thing of a certain nature found a certain seat and room. But the formation of qualities he left to the wills of individuals. For every one of us is made pretty much what he is by the bent of his desires, and the nature of his soul. Cleinias. Yes, that is probably true. Athenian stranger. Then all things which have a soul change and possess in themselves a principle of change, and in changing move according to law, and the order of destiny. Lesser changes of nature move on level ground, but greater crimes sink into the abyss, that is to say, into Hades, and other places in the world below, of which the very names terrify men, and about which they dream that they live in them absent from the body. And when the soul changes greatly, either for the better or worse, by her own impulse or the strong influence of others, when she has communion with divine virtue, and becomes divine, she is carried into another and better place, which is also divine and perfect in holiness. And when she has communion with evil, then she also changes the place of her life. Quote, for that is the justice of the Gods, who inhabit heaven. Close quote. O youth or young man, who fancy that you are neglected by the Gods, know that if you become worse, you shall go to the worse souls, or if better, to the better, and in every succession of life and death you will do and suffer what like may fitly suffer at the hands of like. This is a divine justice, which neither you nor any other unfortunate will ever glory in escaping, and which the ordaining powers have specially ordained. Take good heed of them, for a day will come when they will take heed of you. If thou sayest, I am small, and will creep into the depths of the earth, or I am high, and will fly up to heaven, you are not so small or so high but that you shall pay the fitting penalty, either in the world below, or in some yet more savage place, still to which thou shalt be conveyed. This is also the explanation of the fate of those whom you saw, who had done unholy and evil deeds, and from small beginnings had become great, and you fancied that from being miserable they had become happy, and in their actions, as in a mirror, you seemed to see the universal neglect of the Gods, not knowing how they make all things work together and contribute to the great whole. And thinkest thou, bold man, that thou shouldst not know this, he who knows not this can never see any true form, or say any true word touching the happiness or unhappiness of life. If Cleinias and this reverend company succeed in proving to you that you know not what you say of the Gods, then will God help you. But should you desire to hear more, listen to what we say to the third opponent, if you have any understanding left in you. For I think that we have sufficiently proved the existence of the Gods, and that they have a care of man. That they are appeased by wicked men and take gifts is what I will not allow, and what every man should disprove to the utmost of his power. Cleinias. Very good. Let us do as you say. Athenian stranger. Well then, by the Gods themselves I conjure you to tell me, if they are to be propitiated, how are they to be propitiated? Who are they, and what is their nature? Must not the eternal administrators of heaven be at least rulers? Cleinias. True. Athenian stranger. And to what earthly rulers can they be compared, or who to them? How in the less can we find an image of the greater? Are they charioteers of contending pairs of steeds, or pilots of vessels? Perhaps they might be compared to the generals of armies, or they might be likened to physicians providing against the strife of bodily disease, or to husbandmen observing anxiously the effects of the seasons on the growth of plants, or perhaps to shepherds of flocks. For as we acknowledge the heaven to be full of many goods, and also of evils, and of more evils than goods, there is, as we affirm, an immortal conflict going on among us, which requires marvellous watchfulness, and in that conflict the Gods and demigods are our allies, and we are their property. Injustice and insolence and folly are the destruction of us, and justice and temperance and wisdom are the salvation of us, and the place of these latter is in the life of the Gods, and of their virtues some vestige may occasionally be discerned among mankind. But upon this earth there dwell souls who have an unjust spirit, and they, like brute animals, fawn upon their keepers, who may be dogs or shepherds, or may be the best and most perfect masters; and upon these, as the wicked declare, they prevail by flattery and prayers and incantations, and are allowed to make their gains with impunity. And this sin, which is termed dishonesty, is the same evil as that which is called disease in living bodies, or blight in the seasons, and in cities and governments has another name, which is injustice. Cleinias. Quite true. Athenian stranger. That is what he must say who declares that the Gods are always lenient to the doers of unjust acts, who divide the spoil with them. That is as if wolves might be supposed to toss a portion of their prey to the dogs, and they, mollified by the gift, suffer them to tear the flocks. What but this will he say who maintains that the Gods are to be propitiated? Cleinias. That is what he will say. Athenian stranger. And to whom of the above-mentioned classes of guardians would any man gravely compare the Gods? Will he say that they are like pilots who are themselves turned away from their duty by draughts of wine and the savour of fat, and at last overturn both ship and sailors? Cleinias. Certainly not. Athenian stranger. And surely they are not like charioteers who are bribed to give up the victory to other chariots? Cleinias. That would be a fearful image of the Gods. Athenian stranger. Nor are they like generals, or physicians, or husbandmen, or shepherds, and no one would compare them to dogs who have been silenced by wolves? Cleinias. Do not be profane. Athenian stranger. And are not all the gods the chiefest of all guardians? And do they not guard our highest interests? Cleinias. Yes, the chiefest. Athenian stranger. And shall we say that those who guard our noblest interests, and are the best of guardians, are inferior in virtue to dogs, and to men even of moderate excellence, who would never betray justice for the sake of gifts which unjust men impiously offer them? Cleinias. Certainly not. Nor is such a notion to be endured, and he who holds this opinion may be fairly singled out and characterized as of all impious men the wickedest and most impious. Athenian stranger. Then are the three assertions, that the gods exist, and that they take care of men, and that they will not be entreated to injustice, now sufficiently demonstrated? May we say that they are? Cleinias. You have our entire assent to your words. Athenian stranger. I have spoken with vehemence because I was jealous of evil men, and I will tell you, dear Cleinias, what is the reason of my jealousy. I would not have them suppose that the wicked, having the superiority in argument, may do as they like in accordance with their various imaginations about the gods. And this zeal has led me to speak more vehemently. But if we have at all succeeded in persuading the men to hate themselves and love their opposites, the preamble of our laws about impiety will not have been spoken in vain. Recording by Geoffrey Edwards, in memory of Mitchell Edwards. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain.